Father Becker, Reverend Fathers, honored guest, and my brothers. I'm Brian Kloempken, like Father Bakatu said. I'm going to share with you guys a little bit about my priest here tonight, Father Bob Schreiner. He's kind of this hybrid priest between St. Thomas Aquinas and the great John Paul II. He's kind of big, and he's really smart. Therefore, he's Gandalf the White. Father Bob doesn't have any athletic skills, though, but he loves croquet. It's a strange thing. He really kind of took this like Gandalf the White thing seriously, because he gave me Gimli's battle axe for spiritual warfare inspiration. It's a symbol of Catholicism. If you have any questions, come and ask me later. So. Father Bob was a pastor when I was up in Crookston for 5 years. One night I was sitting at supper with him, and we spent probably a couple hours just talking about, how God was moving in our lives and just past stories. And he shared with me a story about when he was a seminarian. It's kind of funny how when you hear about people before they've really changed a lot, you can kind of pick out little quirks that they kind of carry on from there. Well, Father Bob was a stubborn, antisocial, and anti-athletic seminarian, and which I found kind of strange because he's sitting across the table from this college athlete. But it's strange how the Lord works. He shared with me how he was coerced one afternoon into going on a trip with his brother seminarians. And as he was on the trip, he found out where they were going to a state park. And when they got to the state park, then they told him that they were going to be climbing this mountain, to the likes of which Father Bob was very upset and stubborn and refused to climb the mountain. As he was making his way up the mountain, huffing and puffing and pouting, Father Bob thought about just sitting down and not going any farther, just really being stubborn and just being stubborn. And he got to the top of the mountain, and when he got to the top of the mountain, his breath was taken away by the beautiful sight that he had beholded, and he didn't want to leave. And I thought, well, in many ways, this kind of symbolizes our journey with God, and as we're conforming our will to God's will, we're stubborn, we're antisocial sometimes with God, we don't want to conform to His will. But as we struggle and suffer, and we come to, the top of the mountain, and behold the mystery of our vocation that God's calling us to, it takes our breath away, and we have nothing else to do in our hearts but just to submit and want to stay in the beauty that is God's presence. Father Bob also shared with me the priest that inspired him to priesthood. It was Father Tim Noah. Now, Father Tim Noah has a brother also, Father Dan Noah. They're probably the most unique priests that I've ever met. Father Tim Noah is this big husky guy. They both passed away, but I knew him. Father Tim Noah would speak in this strange kind of accent, and kind of had the same type of authority as Peter Strickland does when he speaks. And then you have Father Dan, who talks like this. And one of my favorite quotes from Father Dan was, when I worked at the hospital, Father Dan showed up one day, and he approached me and goes, "Brian, I have gout." Now, when you're an old priest, you're very open with sharing what you have, and you're ashamed of nothing. No shame. But these two priests, as strange as they were, inspired Father Bob to the priesthood. Now, Father Tim most uniquely inspired Father Bob, and I was struck by the different contrast between the two, because Father Tim would be praying Mass, on Sunday, and then on Sunday afternoon he'd be cleaning the deer that he shot, which is completely contrast to Father Bob, who has nothing wants to do with blood or guts or animals, but he loves to eat them. And then I realized, for the first time, something I've been continually becoming aware of and convinced of is how God doesn't follow social norms. Father Bob and Father Tim had nothing earthly in common, besides the fact that they were both convinced and profoundly in love with Christ, and He was the center and the focus of their life, and He drew them together. And I looked at myself and Father Bob in a similar way. Father Bob was a very intelligent academic guy, but we both, through God's grace, had Him planted in the center of our lives. And Father Bob really personified the priesthood for me, because he did the exact same thing the Word of God did when he became man. Because God humbled himself and in the fullness of time took on the form of a slave, being born in the likeness of men. And Father Bob stepped down from his highly convoluted ideas to meet me, this smelly, bum-dumb football player. And he gave me God. Father Bob was a priest for me. He entered into my life and became a fountain of grace and mercy. He inspired me to do the same thing in other people's hearts. Father Bob is my priest hero. Praise be Jesus Christ. Now and forever.